seeing things in IMAX is always so brilliant because you really feel you're in a concert like this. You know, music films are fantastic in IMAX. They got whatever the 32 speakers or whatever it is they've got, and we've mixed this specially for that experience, for the IMAX experience. And you know, this is the closest you're going to get to seeing John Lennon live.
Virgin Radio.
I guess it's time for a guest, Vassos.
Our next guest is the Oscar-winning director who's given us everything from One Day in September to Life in One Day. He's now back with 1-to-1, John and Yoko, in cinemas from next Friday. So please welcome a man who will take you to docu heaven. It's Kevin Macdonald.
All right, Kev.
All right. Well, that was an introduction, wasn't it?
Cut to the chase. Where'd you keep your Oscar?
I keep it very modestly in a little cupboard, hidden away, just for my own satisfaction to look at it every now and again.
On the coffee table in the middle of the main room in the house with a magnified glass case around it.
No, I don't. It's like all my teenage sons basically have worn all the gold off it over the years by, stealing it, taking it to school.
All right. This is a proper film. Kevin Macdonald, 1-to-1, John and Yoko. 1-to-1, John and Yoko, exclusively in IMAX, 9th and 10th of April, in cinemas everywhere, Friday, 11th of April. More info and tickets via 1-2-1.film. And that's spelling those numbers, not the numbers themselves. ONE-TO-ONE.film. When to embark upon another cinematic journey? Because a proper project like this takes so long. And have you got to be sure before you start, Kev?
Well, you can never. That's the thing about documentary. It's the thing that makes it interesting is you never quite know. You got to just choose. Okay, I'm jumping off the cliff. Will the parachute open or not? And obviously with a historical thing like this, you've got all your archive. You haven't looked at all of it, but we had some amazing things. We had these home movies of John and Yoko's, and we had at the heart of it this incredible concert, which is the only full-length concert that John did after the Beatles stopped touring. So we know that happened in '66. So until 1980 when he died, this is the only time he did a full-length concert, which is itself amazing.
No, I know of the concert. I didn't realise the reasons for the concert till I watched your film, 1-to-1. And the name of the film is the name of the concert, 1-to-1. And you'll find out why when you watch the film. If you like music and you like your rock and roll, and you love the Beatles and you love the right things about life and you love also being surprised at what might have been going on in the 60s and 70s with Nixon and Vietnam, then it is a must not miss film. I know the director is in front of me now, the creator, but I've said that like for the last 3 hours before you were here.
That's lovely. Thank you.
And so I'm looking at 3 tenets here. I mean, there are more. Forgive me if I get this wrong, but I'm looking at the concert itself, the John and Yoko footage, the news archive / ads of the day in between, and then these various mesmerising telephone exchanges, several including the quest to source some flies for Yoko. Now, more about all that in a minute. Let's just focus on the concert for a sec, because of course he's John Lennon, and please don't feel like I'm being facetious or more simple than I usually am here. But he smashes that concert, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. And I think the thing is that the only release of this previously was in 1986 after John's death, and there was a VHS release of it. But the sound quality was so poor because it was... I think everyone was kind of drunk when they were recording it, to be honest.
So how did you redigitize it then?
So using, the latest AI technology, where you can actually separate get basically all the bleed that's come into every track, all the bass that's bled into the vocal track. You can remove all of that and you can remix it from scratch. So it probably sounds better now than it did to the people in Madison Square Gardens when when it originally was played.
I think if you and your technical gang, just got together and repackaged the concert, I think that would do well. That would justify a cinematic release anyway. But it's that, plus. Again, back to the concert to kick off with. He seems so relaxed on stage. I know he wasn't. He's chewing gum all the way through it. Yeah. And you've never heard Lennon vocals like this before. And he's got, I presume he's tuned his guitar to open C or whatever they call it, because he plays a lot of open chord stuff. Yeah. His rendition of Elvis Presley's Hound Dog is, just talking about it now, it's something to behold.
It's joyful, isn't it?
It's joyful and it's fearless and it's sort of it's commanding.
Well, the thing is, he did the concert. And he was obviously nervous. You see him chewing gum the whole time.
He threw up a lot, didn't he, beforehand?
Yeah.
He was...
And so but he absolutely knocks it out the park. But then that's the last time he does it, and you sort of think, "What? You are so good!" Like everyone, including me, thinks of the Beatles as the studio band, basically. They're best when they're just messing around with stuff in the studio. But actually, you look at this and you think, "God, you were so good live. You were so, as you say, fearless." And he only does one Beatles track, and I think that was why at the time the concert went down badly. Nobody liked it. They thought, it's all this politics stuff.
Really?
Yeah. The reviews were terrible, and I think that really, really hurt him. And so, that's sort of what precipitated that, and Nixon winning re-election in November 72, just after the concert, is what precipitated like the Lost Weekend, that period of depression, alcoholism, and then eventually getting back together with Yoko in a couple of years later. So this is a kind of like the turning point of his life. It's what sends him into that last part of isolation, really, in the Kota building.
Watching those live performances, in your film, it's hard for me to comprehend how come the critics weren't even warm to it, but actually ice cold or cold to it. I just don't get that.
Well, I think it's partly because it was probably a bit ragged in the way it was produced, and certainly the reason why we haven't done a film which is just the whole concert film, although there will be one coming up soon, is that the every camera seemed to be operating at a different frame rate, and every sound recorder was operating at a different sound rate, and so that just the technical mess of it was incredible. And then there were all these missing frames of the negative because when they cut it originally, they'd lost bits of his. So putting it all together was a massive task. And luckily, I had an amazing edit team, and they spent, as you can imagine, looking at it, it's a vast job. From
Nixon's point of view, do you think he was public enemy number one for a while? Because there was Timothy Leary and people like that around as well.
Well, I think if you were progressive, if you were like John and Yoko, if you're part of the arty scene in New York and whatever,
and so powerful,
then you really were. And Nixon obviously was the most paranoid man in American politics, and he. Either he or some of his lackeys decided that John was a threat. And so they started bugging his phone, which is the reason why, we'll come to talk about the phone calls that are in the film, but that's why John started recording his own phone calls, because he thought, they're recording me, I think.
He says that in the film, doesn't he?
So I better record myself. So I've got a record of exactly what I did really say.
Yeah, and he's suspicious because he will be paranoid, of course. One could understand why that might be, and he was very much justified in the end, of course. Yeah. But also, there are these strange sounds on the phone line. Now, obviously, in the days of landlines and payphones, those sounds used to happen anyway. But you do get the feeling there's a certain sort of, again, confirmation bias, some kind of sort of coded or encoded rhythm to these clicks and ticks.
Yeah, so I became fascinated by listening to all the sort of little, the little echoes and things you used to get on old phone lines and the clicks and he was pretty convinced. He said, people keep going into the basement here and sort of fixing the phones.
Forever.
Seems like every day. And then he had a driver at the time who was like a ex special forces or something, a guy or no, ex FBI actually, who said to me, we're being followed. And I know these guys. These are government guys who are following us. Yeah. So it wasn't just John's paranoia. Yeah. He really was on.
Well, they were causing such a
list.
Stink for Nixon, weren't they? That was the thing.
Well, that's the thing. And Nixon took it very seriously, and he tried to throw John out of the country. That's obviously one of the other strands of the film. Is that about a third of the way in, John is threatened with losing his visa. It means Yoko will be able to stay because she has an American visa and he doesn't. And he fought for, I think, 4 years before he actually secured his visa and was allowed to stay.
Chaos clearly followed them around. Did you get the sense that they were, not consciously and not purposefully, but they were chaos creators by dint of the combination of their two characters and his global and now eternal fame that was already, or the seeds of which were already being sown. Did you get that sort of, because you do meet people like that. People in this business are like that, and they do tend to turn on their engagement, the attraction of their own magnet, their own chaos magnet every morning when they wake up.
Yeah, I don't think it was kind of a deliberate thing, but I think that he's in this period where we meet him, late 1971. He's just arrived in New York. He's moved into this little tiny apartment in the West Village, and he's escaping from Britain, escaping from that fame and the kind of recriminations around the split of the Beatles and all the blame being put on Yoko. And there was a lot of unpleasantness.
Horrible.
But they were also going there because, and this was something I didn't know since I was making the film, because Yoko had a daughter from a previous marriage who had been basically kidnapped by her ex-husband and was somewhere in America, and they were trying to track down this daughter called Kyoko. So that was what took them there. But John, what amazes me is you listen to all these phone calls of him, and he's just like interested in everything. Yeah. He's so open-minded, and he's like, obviously everyone knows he's a quester. He's somebody who's looking for, the answers to the meaning of life and, how should I live my life? But he's just like fascinated by everybody he meets. Yeah. And I think that aspect of him is what leads to the chaos, because he'll suddenly turn up at some march in support of the Irish Republican Army, and then that causes a load of people to get upset with him. Then the next day he's campaigning for somebody who's been locked up for having 3 joints on them or whatever, and he's just all over the place, bouncing around, and you don't know. Is it naivety? Is it kind of over-enthusiasm? Is it idealism? I don't know.
It's a combination of all those, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he's reading a lot of the headlines, and he's being called up with a lot of the headlines, but he doesn't have time to read all the detail, and sometimes he calls it wrong. Yeah. But he's on it. He speaks so quickly during it. I can't, because when he's in the Beatles, he's a bit fed up, and he's a bit slow. He's a bit more laconic. And over the years, you get to think, oh, that's how he talked. But it's actually not how he talks.
No, he's sharp as a tack. I mean, it's amazing to me how funny he is too. I mean, the wit that comes off him on those phone calls. I mean, I love the bit where he talks about, all the Beatles are Irish, that's why I want to support Irish Republic, except for Ringo, he's Jewish, of course. And the guy on the phone's like,
is he?
Ringo's Jewish?
No, it's just a joke. He's not actually Jewish.
But it's full of these just very, very, very funny, sharp, improvisations.
It's great, man. It's so great. And I couldn't wait for the next performance to start from this gig. And then I couldn't wait for it to end because I wanted more footage. And then once the news and the ads were playing, I wanted more phone calls. And when the phone calls were playing, I wanted to get back. It was brilliant. It's such a carousel that I didn't want to get off.
That's brilliant. Because I mean, that part of what I wanted to do was just create a different kind of music film. Because, we were all fed up with, especially from that classic era of rock and roll, everyone who was involved in that is getting pretty aged now, and we heard their anecdotes a million times before. So how do you present this period and that music in a new way that's exciting and visual and above all immersive?
Well, you've nailed it. You've absolutely nailed it.
Thank you.
Bob Dylan gets a few mentions.
Bob Dylan features quite a lot. He's not actually. He's briefly in it, the one shot of him. But John gets himself involved with this guy who's the garbologist, he called himself, the Dylanologist garbologist, called A.J. Weberman, who used to go around to Dylan's house, which was around the corner from where John and Yoko were, and go through his garbage cans and pick out things and then sort of interpret his songs through what he found in the garbage, and who had decided by this stage that Dylan was a sellout. And, he was attacking him all the time in the underground press. But John wanted Dylan to go on tour with him and Yoko to do this political tour to free prisoners around America. So he's on the phone for hours and hours, him and Yoko both, trying to persuade this guy, A.J. Weberman, who is a kind of a nobody, and a totally paranoid person, try to get him to apologise to Dylan. And you think, what's the world are they living in where they think it's that important to persuade this nobody who goes through people's garbage, spend hours and hours and hours on the phone to him, kind of like trying to persuade him to write this letter of apology, and they're so pleased when he writes this letter of apology.
It's crazy. And the phone calls, how did you get so, the phone calls have been made public. These are the phone calls that John and Yoko recorded because they thought they were being listened into on anyway, and so they recorded these, and you got to use these. Yeah,
well, the funny thing was, so Sean Lennon got behind the idea of the film. I pitched it to him and said, "This is, it's not going to be like anything else that's ever been made about your dad and your mum before, and it's going to be this immersive experience." And he said, "That sounds great. Sounds what my mum would love. She would love that film." So
how relieved to you? And
yeah, I mean, it was brilliant. And then actually, he was so easy and lovely to deal with, actually, and. But when we ended the film, actually, I showed it to him. The only time he actually watched it, actually, was when we finished it, and he said, "Oh, that's the film that gets who my mum is."
Wow,
which was really nice.
And ergo the flies. Now let's talk about the flies. Yeah. So there are narratives within narratives. There's the main arc, which is the gig, and then there's sort of arcs B, C, D, and a sort of semi-E with other things going on. And then there's narrative E plus or E 2.0, which is these blimmin' flies. Because Yoko wants flies for her art exhibition. Where do you get live flies in the centre of New York? How long does it take, and how many people does it take to get these flies?
Yeah, so that's a sort of running gag through the film, because it replicating my experience when I first listened to these phone calls. So what I should have said is that halfway through the edit, we were already sort of had the home movies, and we had all these TV shows and whatever. And then I get this phone call from somebody who works for Sean saying, "I just found this box. It says phone call recordings, 1972. And I'm like, "Really? That's the exact period I'm making the film about. Are you interested in hearing them?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'm interested in hearing them." And so this 30-something hours of footage of audio recordings show up. And literally about a third of it is them all discussing these flies. How do you get flies in the middle of winter for this conceptual art piece that Yoko wants to do? And it just becomes funnier and funnier and funnier as it goes on and on and on for weeks and weeks. So I thought that's I can't miss out that. It's a hilarious strand
and in
to
the
include.
end, their gang sort of vicariously become experts on flies. Like their manager goes, well, the thing about flies is that we've learned they only live for a day. And then in the end they go, well, we found some flies that live for 5 days depending on how you treat them. Okay, well, we'll have 500 for Monday, we'll have 500 for Tuesday, and then we'll see how we do come Wednesday. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's brilliant and bonkers. It's the other, you realise that obviously John has come from rock and roll and all the rules of that world, and he's loving being part of the art scene, and he's learning so much from Yoko. And as he said, they basically collaborated on everything in that period, including Imagine, which is really Yoko's lyrics, pretty much. And if you've read her book Grapefruit, it's basically the same ideas that are in Imagine. So that really should be credited to the both of them.
It's great, mate. It's great. We're out of time. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Get out there. IMAX.
No, I just think that if seeing things in IMAX is always so brilliant because you really feel you're in a concert like this. Music films are fantastic in IMAX. They got whatever the 32 speakers or whatever it is they've got, and we've mixed this especially for that experience, for the IMAX experience. And this is the closest you're going to get to seeing John Lennon live.
Can't Sean Julian / Yoko get you in the Sphere for a week or two with this?
You know what? That was my dream. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Have you thought about it? So you think? No,
we did think about it. I think the thing is that a lot of the archive is probably too grainy. Although that would be a kind of a part of what's amazing of the experience. Yeah.
I wonder how booked up the Sphere is.
Funnily enough, it's owned by the same person as who owned Madison Square Gardens.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Sphere Entertainment UK. Sphere Entertainment. Yeah, it was going to be UK, USA.
It was going to be UK, unfortunately.
We were going to have one here, weren't we?
Yeah, I know.
And then the planners turned them down.
Light pollution.
We don't want a Sphere. Yes, we do. Not if you live around here. We'll pay for the blackout blinds. Don't worry about it. Kev, congratulations, mate. What are your hopes and dreams for this?
Well, I just hope that people who like John Lennon, loved Yoko Ono, are going to go and they're going to see a new side of them. It's very intimate. I think that's the thing, is that you come away, you don't necessarily learn factually new things, but you come away, I think, feeling like you know who they are as people. And you also feel for Yoko in a way. I think that's what Sean recognised in the film, is that you feel for her because you understand, first of all, she's had her daughter kidnapped. She's really sort of questioning herself. She talks a bit at one stage in a song about committing suicide and feeling pretty suicidal, she says. And she talks about the difficulties of being married to a legend like John. She calls him, she says, I was accused of stealing your monument. Yeah. Which I think is such a great, and especially he is a monument. The Beatles are all monuments now. Yeah. And so you do begin to see things from her point of view, because she can be quite a forbidding presence, can't she? But I think in the film, you see the sweeter emotional side of her. A
friend of mine, we were having a text conversation whilst I was watching your film about he's in America, he's in Los Angeles, and he said, well, I know we were talking about history repeating, because there are echoes and there certainly are. There are echoes and there are ripples, between what was going on then and what's going on now. And he said history repeats. And then I heard this thing the other week, which I've stolen, but it's not mine. Yeah. It's not history that repeats, it's human nature that repeats.
I think that's the thing. So true. And I think it's 54 years ago, whatever this is. And, so many of as we were making the film, we had George Wallace, who's a populist politician at the time. He's in the film. He gets shot on camera. And then 2 weeks later, as we were in the edit, Trump gets shot. Yeah. We had Shirley Chisholm is in the film, who was the first black woman to run for president. And Kamala Harris is coming out running for president. All the same debates about Gaza now, Vietnam War then, the sit-ins at colleges, the Nixon government trying to shut those down, trying to expel students. I mean, it is the same thing, which I guess is comforting, and maybe it means that, this is not the end of the world.
There's a rhythm to how we live as a species.
I think that's right. We can't escape from human nature.
Well, Kev, you're the best. You've smashed it, mate. Congratulations. How long did it take?
Oh, it's about 2 years.
Wow. You don't mess about, you film people, do you? My medium is the opposite of what you do for a living. We're 3.5 hours every day, and it takes 3.5 hours every day, and we'll take it. Thanks, Kev.
Thanks very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Lovely to chat to you.
1-to-1 film, 1-to-1 dot film rather, for more info and tickets. This film is amazing. Film 1-to-1, John and Yoko, exclusive in IMAX, 9th and 10th of April. Cinemas everywhere after that. All right, let's hear it for Kevin Macdonald. Why not? Let's give a big cheer, a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Woohoo!